if you've molested an American child, shouldn't you be required to stand justice?
It's an allegation. You're innocent until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Why are millions of Epstein files still classified? Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I haven't kept up with that. Not sure I ever met him in my many times. You know, I've been to Israel over 100 times since 1973. The first time I came here was 1973, July. No question about that.
But why meet with him in the U.S. Embassy? Your colleagues said they were shocked. They said...
Who were the colleagues that said they were shocked?
Hey everybody, happy Friday. So while I was getting some stuff done around the house, I was just listening to the interview between Tucker Carlson and Mike Huckabee. Now, he gives a pretext to this interview where he talks about how his producer was allegedly detained and asked all these questions, and that he claims that they were actually trying to tell him to leave and get on his plane without his producer, and that his producer would come later. Now, like I said, I was doing a bunch of stuff around the house while I was listening to this, so I didn't have it on screen to record the whole thing, to do a whole breakdown. I didn't even finish the whole interview, to be honest. I got through about maybe 80% of it, but I don't want to jump to any conclusions. You know, I really, I want to be careful, and I want everybody to know that this platform is not some kind of echo chamber. I'm all about individual accountability, and everything gets so politicized that when you end up on one side or the other, and then you're listening to these influencers and they're not being objective at all, and they're all just, spinning the same narratives, it gets very, very confusing on who you can listen to and who you can trust for the truth. So I'm not going to make any opinions on that. More recently, I would definitely say that my own ideologies align much more with Tucker Carlson, but nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. There are misunderstandings. So I try to take things with a grain of salt and see for myself. I know that there is footage that shows him taking a picture and, hugging with one of the people there, but that doesn't really mean much either, especially if the person was just detained, if his producer was detained and he was trying to get out of there, and then at the end of it, they're asking him to take the picture. Like, there's no audio. There's no real context in that situation. So I don't think that that's as strong of evidence one way or another. So I don't want to speak on that. But what I do want to do, and what I did find very telling, was some of the questions that Tucker was asking and some of the answers that he was getting from Mike Huckabee. And I just want to go over a couple of them real quick. And I just want you to think about, because Mike Huckabee, he's a member of Trump's cabinet. He is the ambassador representing America in Israel. He's supposed to be representing the interest of Americans and the nation as a whole in Israel. And I mean, that, I will say, was not really the vibe that I was getting from this. And it kind of felt like he was talking out of both sides of his mouth. Now, up until recently, with all of these recent files that have come out and, the Charlie Kirk case and whatnot, I always tried to stay away from the Middle East in terms of giving my opinions. As at the time a non-practicing Christian in America, from my perspective, it's okay, you have Jews, you have Muslims, you have a land in another country, on another part of the world. It's not my business. I would always hope that they would find peace. I think now more than ever, especially with all the gaslighting that's going on and the false accusations of anti-Semitism, it is more important than ever for us to make sure that there is no actual anti-Semitism. And I do have a lot of Jewish friends. I have friends that are from Israel that have the dual citizenship, that I know are good people, that I care a lot about. So not only am I not going to judge them over allegations connecting to Epstein or any of this other stuff, but I will defend them. And that is the truth. And I think that that is the mind state that we all have to have. Individual accountability. We want to shine a light and expose the bad people in, from any ethnicity, from any nation. Evil is evil. We want to shine a light on it. We want to expose it, but we have to protect the innocents. We have the same responsibility and the same urge and responsibility that I feel inside myself to expose this evil. Like, I'm doing it to protect the innocent. And a lot of times, yes, that is citizens of Israel. That is Jews within my community that support Israel. We're allowed to disagree. And right now, the stakes are so high, and it gets so sensitive when you're talking about the death of children, the abuse of children, and everything. But just keep in mind that not everybody has the same information. Not everybody has been exposed to everything yet. And we haven't been exposed to all the information yet. So we're going to cover this. We're going to cover some clips from this Tucker Carlson interview. And, you guys can make up your own minds about it. I will offer some minimal commentary on it, but I just want everybody to be objective. And I think that every one of us needs to be the change that we want to see.
Later, his wife passed away here in Israel. And I sent him a note and just said, I'm sorry to hear about your wife. I remember meeting her at the hotel and sorry to hear it. He then asked, could he come and see me? He wanted to come and thank me for being kind to him. He came to the embassy. I think we met for maybe 30 minutes. We had a nice, pleasant visit. The funny thing was the New York Times reported that it was a secret meeting. Tucker, if you've ever been to the U.S. Embassy, you would know there's no such thing as a secret meeting at the U.S. Embassy.
Sure.
There are cameras everywhere.
Keep in mind, Jonathan Pollard was in prison for a long time for espionage against the United States, spying for Israel.
You walk through Marines, you walk through security, you walk through the front office, and there's a dozen or more people that are going to check you out when you come. And before you get there, you're going to have to give us your passport information. You're going to have to be vetted and screened and all of this stuff. So the idea that it was secret was ludicrous. The whole idea is, look, Jonathan Pollard did something that was terribly wrong. He sold secrets. He shouldn't have done it. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and spent 30, actually was, I think he was sentenced to maybe more than 30 years, but he spent 30 years in prison. Most people convicted of something similar, which was one count, I believe, would have spent 2 to 4, but he spent 30. I don't have a problem with him spending 30 because I think what he did was despicable. I'm not defending anything about what he did. But even people like the former director of the CIA,
I appreciate hearing you say that.
A number of other senators on the Senate Foreign Relations of the Senate Intel Committee said that he should be allowed to leave and move to Israel if he wanted to. So it, to me, was not as big a deal that I had this basically courtesy meeting. He wanted to thank me for being nice to him when his wife died.
I think it's still a big deal. I think it's highly inappropriate. And I mean, you're an ambassador representing the United States of America, and you're giving a courtesy to somebody who committed espionage and was, I mean, in all factuality, I mean, was not basically, but was a traitor to the United States, the country that you represent. So I don't think that it was appropriate. And although I'm happy that he's at least calling out how wrong what he did was, I mean, Jonathan Pollard, it is definitely concerning that he was meeting with him.
That's pretty much the story.
You advocated for his release when you ran for, I remember it, in 2011, long before he had served 30 years. And I agree with you that there are a lot of people languishing in prison, you know, in our country and in this country, and many countries, you know, for longer periods than they deserve. And I think it's a Christian impulse to want to see them free. But this was the greatest traitor in modern American history who sold our battle plans against the Soviet Union, our main enemy in the Cold War, to the Israeli government, which according to our Reagan CIA director, Bill Casey, then gave them to the Soviet Union. So this was the most profound betrayal.
Our greatest ally. We're in the Cold War with who was supposed to be our greatest enemy, and our greatest ally gives them our battle plans? What's that about?
Of the United States in my lifetime. Why advocate for that guy's release before he serves his full sentence?
If that were the case in 2011, it would have been because I had a number of friends that suggested that he had more than served time and he didn't want to live in the U.S. anymore. He wanted to live in Israel. And but my association with him, again, I had never met him until I met him in Jerusalem at a hotel. That was.
What does that mean, though? That he's like, you made a position. You spoke out a position for his release and to let him move. And then when you're asked about your stance, you just like pass the buck and say, oh, I had some friends that liked him and thought that it was a good idea. Like, who are these friends? What were their intentions? Were you financially connected to them in any way? Were they like some sort of lobbyists? Like, that's not leadership. That's not even what Tucker's asking. So where's the integrity? Whatever. I'm not trying to be aggressive. I'm trying to be
the first time I had ever encountered him.
I'm friends with 1 million bad people, or I've talked to 1 million bad people.
I'm sitting here with you. I mean, come on.
I mean,
So
she's the same with tax collectors. So trust me, do not judge people who are friends or know or enjoy the company of immoral people, because it's not an endorsement of their immoral behavior. Pollard is different. I think once you become U.S. ambassador, the representative of the president of the United States and the United States of America in a foreign country, and then you invite not only the most damaging betrayer in our lifetimes, but also a guy who continues to advocate for betrayal. So he gave an interview, as I know you know, in 2021 to Israeli media, in which he said, I would encourage Jewish Americans with security clearances to spy for Mossad against their own country, the United States, because, and I'm pretty much quoting him, all Jews should have dual loyalty. That's not repentance. That's not someone who feels bad about what he did. That's someone who's encouraging American Jews to betray their country.
Yeah, that's
pretty
very,
heavy,
very
don't you think?
Oh, I do.
That's very concerning.
And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think, let's remember, it was President Trump who probably
You didn't disagree with
facilitated
it
his
enough not to give
departure.
him the courtesy.
And I'm certainly supportive of President Trump. I think you are. And
Pollard's not. He called him a madman after your meeting.
that's why I say Pollard is not, for me, the real issue. It was the fact that he did something that was despicable. I'm not denying that. Of course he did. And he paid dearly for it, 30 years in prison, and he should have. That's what he should have done. There's no question about
But
that.
why meet with him in the U.S. Embassy? Your colleagues said they were shocked. They said,
Who were the colleagues that said they were shocked?
quoted on Background in the New York Times. I think the
Background, of
meeting
course.
was in August.
I mean, I think everybody should be shocked. Like, you see how he's trying to check, like who said they were shocked? Why would they be shocked? It's because you're the U.S. ambassador and you're meeting a traitor, giving a traitor to the United States a courtesy meeting, who's going around advocating for other people to be traitors to the U.S. Like, it's common sense. The fact that you don't understand, I'm like looking at Tucker. I always do this. I always like look at the wrong person on the screen. But the fact that this guy doesn't understand why somebody would be shocked about him meeting Jonathan Pollard is like a huge red flag. It's like a huge red flag. But let's keep going. I don't want to. We're not covering this whole thing. I just want to hit a couple clips.
There have been Americans in prison in Israel. There have also been, and there continue to be, dozens and dozens and dozens of accused sex offenders from the United States who fled to Israel, including one recently, an Israeli government official who was caught trying to molest a 15-year-old girl. And
yeah, this is one
fled
of the biggest issues
to Israel and is
what
not
goes
going
on
back to
with
the United States to stand charges for attempted
greatest
molestation
ally.
of a child. Have you advocated for the Israeli government to return him to the United States?
I'm not familiar with that case. It has not come to us at the embassy. So I'm not aware. Is this the person in Nevada?
That is correct.
Okay, I
in
heard
Clark
about
County, I would imagine so.
Yeah, I heard about it, but I heard about it through open source media. It was never something that was presented to us, but I would have.
How come nobody's presenting it to you? If you're the ambassador for the United States, you're representing the United States in the interest. Shouldn't you be representing justice for children in America that were victims of that kind of abuse? Like, the fact that you're saying that nobody brought that to your attention is really a red flag for the whole system. Like, that seems to me like exactly the kind of thing that you should be over there working on, representing us.
Have no problem with him being extradited back to the U.S.
It's very interesting that he just used those words, that he has no problem. Not, oh, absolutely. Now that I know, let me look into it and we'll get justice for the victim. He doesn't have a problem with someone who allegedly abused children being extradited.
Or the president's and our country's representative in the state of Israel. So I think it would fall to you to advocate with your friend, the prime minister, to say, wait a second, we have a very close relationship. We're obviously the single largest source of outside funding for this country. How can you take an accused child molester and shield him from American justice, send him back to the United States? Have you ever had that conversation?
No, because the prime minister would not be the proper person
That may be
in
right.
Israel
Pardon my ignorance. But
that would deal with an extradition. It would go through their court system. And so the prime minister is separate, very similar to what we have in the U.S., where there is a separation of powers. So it would go through something other than
Okay,
the
but don't
prime
make a
minister.
straw
Have you
man argument
advocated
about it.
to
There's
the
somebody
courts,
you
to
can call.
judges, to anybody in the Israeli justice system?
There has never been a request for me to engage in that. I would be happy to do it. If the White House sent a message to me, I do work for the president. I serve at his pleasure. If anyone at the White House were to say to me, would you please go and make a case for it? But probably, if that were to happen, it wouldn't come through the embassy as much as it would likely come from the Department of Justice at the U.S. in D.C. They would make the request. They might involve.
You know what? That argument I will actually give him. Although I think it's a red flag that he said that he wouldn't have a problem with a guy getting extradited. Him saying, like, listen, there is a process for that sort of thing, and not that he's trying to pass the buck, but if he is correct in that the DOJ would have to submit some type of paperwork and it would have to like work its way up, or the president himself would have to make a call. That's a fair position. That's a fair statement for him to make. All right. And this is what I mean about being objective. Nobody's always going to be right. Nobody's always going to be wrong. If you want people to be objective and open-minded with your positions, you have to be objective and open-minded with others. And for this particular statement that he made, if he's correct with the process itself, him saying, look, that's not my job to take matters into my own hands. I work for the president. I'm told what to do. That's not on my agenda. I mean, I don't agree with it, but if that's what it is, that's what it is. We got to respect it.
Us, but they very likely would not.
Does it seem strange to you that people accused of child molestation in the United States are allowed to have refuge within the borders of our closest ally?
Now, this is different. Now he's asking him for his personal opinion. And it doesn't have to do with his job and his position and what he's able to do within his jurisdiction. It's how does he feel about situations like that on a personal level?
That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I would say that
if you've molested an American child, shouldn't you be required to stand justice?
It's an allegation. Let's be clear. One of the things about our system of jurisprudence, you're innocent until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right away, he's assuming innocence. He's not even advocating for the extradition and the trial. He's saying, listen, he's innocent until proven guilty. That's pretty biased, especially now with the files that came out and everything that we've seen. For anybody to take any position with a bias towards someone abusing children, I'm sorry, but that's just disgraceful. My personal opinion is that's just disgraceful.
So if the charges are there, should he be extradited? I would say so.
The charges are there.
Yeah. Okay. So they should be, but that's a Justice Department decision, and they're the ones who should be pursuing it. To my knowledge, they haven't. They certainly haven't engaged the U.S. Embassy over it.
Why would the Israeli government harbor fugitives from justice in the United States?
I'm not sure that
there are dozens and dozens and dozens. In fact, there's an Israeli group that keeps track of them that is dedicated, Jewish Israeli group dedicated to combating the molestation of children, and keeps a long list. And then you can look it up, and I wouldn't.
See? You see what Tucker Carlson just said? There's a Jewish Israeli group that is keeping track and wants justice for the victims. They want accountability. Just keep that in mind.
I hope you're not saying that you think the Israelis support the molestation of children.
Obviously, I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I'm saying that the Israeli government shields accused child molesters from justice in the United States.
I'm not sure I could say that that's something that is provable. I don't know. But I am not aware that the Israeli government is.
Well, I mean, don't the files kind of prove it? Like, I'm not trying to be a wise ass, but seriously.
Security official who was at a conference in Las Vegas last year and was caught up in a sting designed to catch people soliciting sex from children. He was one of a number of people arrested for this. He was arraigned and charged. And then 2 days later, he fled to Israel and did his first hearing by Zoom. He was allowed for some reason to leave for a foreign country, having already been charged for an attempted molestation of a child. And he remains here now. And there have been many news stories about this. And I just wonder if you would ask the Israeli government to put him on a plane and send him back to face justice for attempting to molest an American child. It doesn't seem complicated.
No, I wouldn't mind doing that, but I want to find out if the Justice Department of the U.S. is already...
He wouldn't mind. You see the mentality of what we're dealing with? He wouldn't mind. Where's the morality? Where's the integrity? These are the type of people that Trump is putting around him, putting in the cabinet. People that clearly are not against protecting children in America, or just children in general. The same way that he says, I wouldn't mind sending him on a plane, it's almost like he's saying that he doesn't mind the abuse happening. I think there's a strong argument for that, especially when you consider all those files that came out and that this administration is not doing a damn thing about it except trying to cover it up.
Sought to extradite him. Is there anything in process? I don't know.
Why wouldn't they seek to extradite him?
I have no idea. That's a question for the Justice Department.
I have many questions for the Justice Department. Like, why are millions of Epstein files still classified? What
there
do
we
you think
go.
that is?
I have no idea. I haven't kept up with that. I've never met the man. I don't know him.
You haven't kept up with the Epstein disclosure?
I mean, only from a distance. I'm 6,000 miles away from D.C. these days.
He is the ambassador. He is the American ambassador in Israel. We have basically proof of who he was working for. And he's just brushing it off. Like, yeah, I'm keeping up from a distance. What does it have to do with me? I'm here in Israel representing America. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Pretty sure that there's so
The
much going on.
current president of Israel, current president, who I know you know, President Herzog,
Knowing very well.
apparently was at Pedo Island. That's what it says in the disclosures. And of course, we know that the former prime minister, Ehud Barak, was living on and off at Epstein's house. So still living high-level Israeli officials are directly implicated in Epstein's life, if not his crime. So I would think that you'd be following this.
Only
Careful, Tucker. They're going to say that you're anti-Semitic for asking these questions.
I was not aware that there was any connection with President Herzog. I would be surprised to hear that, and knew there was about the former prime minister, who apparently had a lot of dealings with Epstein.
Business dealings. And by the way, I'm not alleging anything, but I mean, it's in the Epstein files. And I don't know that I've heard the current president of Israel respond to it, but he is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island. So that's kind of a big deal. I wonder, considering there are so many suggestions in the files, as I'm sure you know, of sexual abuse, and given that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender, I wonder why the administration you work for would be holding millions of files, which I believe belong to the public, hidden for, quote, national security reasons. What would those national security reasons be, do you think?
Honestly, I think you've probably got more access to the White House sometimes than I do. You should ask them.
Well, but you're the government official representing that White House.
In Israel. And I represent the U.S. in Israel to the Israeli government from the U.S. government. But honestly, nobody has presented that to us.
Well, now
we have
that
a
you know
pretty
that
dynamic situation here. I don't know if you know.
I'm like really trying to be objective, but I'm really disturbed. Like, this is scary.
Know that or not, but there's a lot going on in this part of the world, and frankly, that has not been top line item.
But you're surprised to hear that the current president of Israel, whom you know, is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island.
Had never heard that. Never heard it even in the Israeli press.
Are you going to ask him next time you see him?
I'll be happy to talk to him almost every week.
I guess what I'm asking is not simply as a representative of my government or a high U.S. official, but just as like a man and a father and a Christian. How could you resist saying, like, were you on Pedo Island with Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, if I'm not aware of it, and secondly, there are a lot of things that go on in the world. I don't question every single person.
Nobody's aware. Kash Patel's not aware. Les Wexner wasn't aware. Nobody's aware. Everybody's got their head in the sand. People don't want to look. But I don't really believe that in his case. You're going to tell me that this guy has not been briefed and coached on how to answer these questions? You will never convince me of that. You will never convince me that they sat him down and said, look, this is what you need to know. This is what he's probably going to ask. If he says this, answer with that. Same thing with that deposition with Les Wexner yesterday, where whenever he's asked about where he heard about certain things, he kept saying the news. Oh, it was CNN. Oh, it was the news, the news. Because the second he names an individual, all of a sudden, you can ask more questions. Now you have another person that you could ask questions to.
About every single thing that may be alleged about.
Country.
I understand all that, but this is the first I've ever heard of this. So why do you expect me to have knowledge of something like that?
Well, because you attacked me personally for suggesting that Jeffrey Epstein had ties to Mossad, and you said that.
You think he does?
What's very clear he does from the files.
You think he does? From where do you get that?
Well, the fact that he was in contact repeatedly with members of the Israeli government, including the current president and the former prime minister, and all kinds of Israeli intel-connected people. I'm not saying he worked for Mossad. I don't think we know that. But there's no question that he had extensive contact with CIA.
I think you said it, a turning point event. Everybody knows Jeffrey Epstein.
I said everyone thinks, and it turns out everyone was right, that he did have.
I'm not sure everyone was right or everyone thinks.
Okay, but you said that I was lying, and I don't want to make this about me.
I don't think I said you were lying, Tucker. I don't recall.
I'm just saying, why don't we release all the files, and then we don't need to guess?
I got no problem with that. Go ahead.
Would you call on it? Well, because you weighed in on it and said that this was not true, when of course...
I said there was no evidence.
Well, there's quite a bit of evidence, but you haven't apparently bothered to read any of the files. Is that what you're saying?
I have not.
I don't think Mike Huckabee works for America.
Read the Epstein files? Apparently you have.
Well, they're on the internet.
But when you say that that everybody knows that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent,
everyone believes that.
I don't think everybody does. I don't know.
Well, everyone knows that he had contact with, and by the way, not just Israeli intelligence, American intelligence, which is much more distressing for me. I'm not Israeli, I'm American. I don't want my government having any contact with someone like Jeffrey Epstein. So the shame
I wouldn't either.
is on the United States, as far as I'm concerned, just to be totally clear about that.
I think that Epstein operated in a space above or next to intelligence. I don't think like Jeffrey Epstein was like a Mossad agent. He was definitely an intelligence asset for both Mossad and the CIA. But I think that him and Ghislaine Maxwell operated in their own lane. And I think that their interests were much more aligned with that of Mike Huckabee's than the American people. And I hope nobody minds me saying so.
Everyone's very sensitive about the Israel connection, not at all sensitive about the U.S. connection, which I find very revealing. We should care about what our government does first, I think. But since you weighed in on it and said there's no evidence, I'm surprised that since that evidence has been open to the public for a month, since you've already weighed in publicly on this question, that you've made no effort to evaluate that evidence. Why is that?
I just told you I was certainly not aware that there were some specific allegations. I knew about the former prime minister, but I don't know him. I'm not sure I ever met him in my many times. I've been to Israel over 100 times since 1973. The first time I came here was 1973, July. And that's almost 53 years of coming and going to this country. So I know the country well. I know a lot of people here, but I don't.
53 years is a long time to get compromised. Just saying.
I don't know everything, and I don't know everybody, but I do know a lot of people.
Of course, no, and I can see your love for it, and I think that's great. But I'm talking about the U.S. government and its responsibility to, there's a lot of complaint about conspiracy theories and everyone, he's a hater. Everyone's assigning motive. But there's a way to end these conversations very quickly with facts. And I'm highly confused by...
Have you brought this up to the president?
No, I don't work for him. I've said this many times.
I know you don't work for him, but you go to the White House and you see people there. You and J.D. Vance are very good friends. So have you brought this up to them? Because
I have brought this up in public many times.
It's not on my portfolio, but apparently it's very strongly on your mind. And I'm
child
just thinking
molestation
you should
is
deal
a
with it.
significant concern for me.
Well, it should be for everybody. But if,
So far since we've watched this, we've seen Mike Huckabee defend Jonathan Pollard and giving him that courtesy meeting, saying that he paid his dues. He didn't really have a strong stance against Jonathan Pollard, still advocating for other people to potentially be traitors to America and put the interests of a foreign nation first. We've seen him with a very, very lenient stance on people with allegations of abusing children, saying that he wouldn't mind if they got extradited. It almost sounds like he didn't mind those kids getting abused in the first place. And now he's basically acting like a lawyer for, you could say, either Israel or Jeffrey Epstein, and definitely representing Israel's interest, deflecting from all of the compounding and mounting evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was operating in the interests of Israel. And at that point, it's just a fact. It's just a fact. Like, just remember, you go back to the 1800s. It was the Rothschilds who were financing the immigration, moving Jews into the land that we now know today as Israel. That's just a fact. You look up the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which I believe Mike Huckabee references at some point in this interview. And the Rothschilds are involved in that too. And then if you look in the files, Jeffrey Epstein worked directly for the Rothschilds. He said as much to Peter Thiel. I work for the Rothschilds. So it doesn't really matter whether or not he was an intelligence asset or a Mossad agent. It's very clear where his interests were aligned. And just from watching this and what we've seen, it's pretty clear where Mike Huckabee's interests are aligned as well. And it's very disturbing to think that he is an American ambassador who's supposed to be representing our interests and answers directly to the President of the United States, and that the positions he's taking, the decisions he's making, the fact that he's not trying to get all the information that, you bet your ass, if I was the ambassador for the United States and Israel, I would want to know about every allegation. Anything connecting United States and Israel, I would want to know it all. And if it wasn't true, I would want to know why. If there was a theory with any kind of evidence, I would do my due diligence and get to the bottom of it so that I am as educated as possible and can make critical decisions and do like an objective analysis and know the truth and act in my country's best interest. And he just seems to be ignoring anything. And Mike Huckabee is not doing that. he's ignoring the truth, he's looking the other way, or he's just flat out lying to defend it. But that's for you guys to decide. And this is a really long interview. Like I said, I didn't even finish it yet. I'm going to cut this short now, though. I hope that we can find out more about the truth about what actually happened at that airport and his producers being allegedly detained, or his producers allegedly getting detained. I would like to find out more, and based on factual evidence. But remember what I said earlier, and remember what I always say. Be kind, be grateful, do something nice for somebody, and I will see you guys tonight.